Hi, I'm Paul Miles and I'm at TU-Automotive in Detroit 2016. And today I'm joined by Jim Levendusky. He's Vice President at Verisk Telematics. Hi Jim, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
I want to look at new technology. Always brings new challenges, and the autonomous vehicle with insurance is going to change the scene.
Absolutely.
How are we going to solve these major stumbling blocks that could be there?
Right. A good question. You know, it's interesting, and I spoke about this in my presentation. If you go back 100 years when automobiles were first introduced and were becoming popular and insurance policies were being introduced, even back then, insurance companies were asking the question, what are the things that predict the future probability of loss? And even 100 years ago, they were talking about driving behavior as being the primary factor. The only problem, of course, is there was no technology at that point, to be able to measure driving behavior. Fast forward to the present, and now you've got all of these embedded sensors, and you've got the wireless communications attached to the car, and so you've got this plethora of data that's becoming available. And so the insurance industry is now faced with data sets that are new to them and are categorically different from anything that they've experienced before. In the past, they've used things like proxies, age, sex, marital status, financial information, proxies for risk, and these were relatively well-behaved, well-ordered data sets. But the sensor data that's coming out of cars and aftermarket parts and smartphones, very granular, very detailed, very different from what insurance companies are accustomed to using. And so it's early days for them. They're learning what the data types are, how best to use them, how to find, the signal, through the noise. And they're also trying to figure out which data elements are important. And they're getting their arms around this. And I think what's happening is, they're building up their core expertise. There are a lot of companies that are now in market with UBI programs. They've got R&D teams. But one of the challenges that they're facing really is there are so many sources of data. Not just the quantity of data, the data types, the fact that it's categorically different. But now there are so many different types, so many different sources of information. How do they collect all this? Is it even possible for individual insurance companies to manage, scores or maybe even hundreds of relationships with trading partners on a daily basis? And so one of the things that we've been asked by the insurance industry at Verisk is to create a data exchange, to act as an aggregator of information, and so we can help solve the many-to-many problem. We can bring together the hundreds of potential data sources for sensor information. We can also bring together the hundreds of insurance companies who look to utilize this information as part of their products.
I understand. So obviously, you mentioned UBI. Now the uptake of UBI has been patchy, to say the least, in various countries. But with the advent of the autonomous vehicle, is it that everyone eventually will have UBI, whether they want it or not? It's going to be in the car.
Right.
So is that something that the consumer will like, or will he just have to lump it?
Right. I guess there's a couple of viewpoints. As far as the penetration of UBI in the marketplace, I think, what the UBI has struggled with the data collection piece. Up till now, it's been a matter of using, third-party devices or smartphone apps, and this brings a whole bunch of challenges, to the fore. The expense of hardware, the distribution of software, supporting the customer, getting the customer to volunteer to opt in, to install a device or download an app, and all of that friction with the customer, I think has held back the adoption rate of UBI. With the convergence of the connected car in the insurance industry, now I think this has the ability to transform UBI, and I think what will likely happen is more and more customers will adopt UBI because the collection of their data done with their consent will be much more easy. There will be far easier for them to opt into a UBI program, and they will be able to manage their data. One of the things with the exchange that's very important to us is making sure that there's transparency. Consumers, understand what data is being collected and how it might be used, and always to do it with their consent. So to make sure that we get their consent to collect their data, and then when they approach an insurer of their choice, the insurer has to ask for their consent to access the data. So the consumer is in control. So our feeling is, between the transparency and giving the consumer control of his or her data, basically that addresses a lot of the questions around whether or not consumers want to opt in. Well, they have that choice. It's not mandatory, it's a choice.
Thank you very much for talking to me.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.